Thanks so much for everyone for joining us for today's Career and Identity Intersections. Today we're going to be talking all about negotiation. Before we get started, I'm going to go over a few virtual communal agreements just to keep us on track. We ask any of our participants to go ahead and mute your microphone. That'll just make sure that there's no audio issues today. You can feel free to turn on your closed captioning so you can see the text version of everything the panelists are saying. You can choose to keep your video on or off. But we ask that our presenters use both their audio and video. If you have any questions for the panelists, go ahead and ask them via the chat so that we can all see the question. And to let everybody know, we are recording this presentation so that we can use it on our website and social media. So I am your faithful moderator today. My name is Lynn Metters. I'm the Assistant Director for Employer Relations in the Career Services Office. If I looked quite as glamorous or even half as glamorous as my headshot, I would maybe be on camera, but work from home. So with that being said, we are going to go ahead and move into our panelist introduction. So we will just go in the order listed on the slides. And we ask that you introduce yourself, give us a little snippet about where you work and what your role is, and maybe brief overview of sort of what your day-to-day looks like. So we will go ahead and start with Dr. Mary Whitehead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. I'm really excited. Again, my name is Dr. Mary Whitehead. I'm the Director for Student Diversity and Social Justice at UNLV. My role in my day-to-day is kind of different depending on what it is, but really advocating for students at UNLV, those typically from marginalized communities, advocating on institutional levels, sometimes even within the greater Las Vegas, and really being able to be a safe space for students to come and feel like they are represented and feel like they're welcome on the campus. So I do a lot of things, but really pretty much here for the students.
Hi everyone, I am Mandy Pan. I work at Teach for America as a manager for reporting and data analytics. And I basically support all of our external affairs teams from recruitment to admissions, marketing, and ensure that they have the proper data and analytics to support what they do to ensure that all students in this nation have access to a quality education.
Hi, everyone. My name is Noelle Miller. I work for Land's End, which is a mid-sized retail company here in Wisconsin. I'm a project manager, about 8 years into my project management career. And on a day-to-day basis, I'm working with the Land's End IT teams to address any of our strategic projects that I'm assigned, as well as supporting my peers in the project management office in creating the requirements and executing the project plans that help us to move our company forward.
Awesome. Thank you for those intros. We are very excited to have all of you assisting us today as we talk about negotiation. So we'll go ahead and move into our first section of questions, which are a series of true or false. So we decided to go with it this way because there's a lot of myths and rumors and all sorts of things circulating around negotiation. So the 4 topics for this one are whether or not all job offers are considered negotiable, whether or not a candidate can have their offer rescinded as a result of a negotiation, whether or not negotiation is something you're either good or bad at, and if negotiation is truly a one-time thing. So if you take the job, is the process over? So you can tackle all of these, one of them if you feel really good about it. You can blend them into one beautiful answer, whatever feels right. And we will start with Mandy on this one. And when you're done, just go ahead and popcorn it to the next person.
Thanks. So one of my biggest regrets is not negotiating my first job offer out of college. I think I played into a lot of these myths. What if they rescinded my offer? Why would I negotiate? Because they already gave me a really good offer. I've never negotiated before because I'm bad at it. And so I didn't negotiate. And so I think thinking about a lot of these myths. Those were the things I was thinking about. So now going into any job offer, I always negotiate because I do believe that pretty much all job offers are negotiable. Everybody's situation is different, and so everybody has their own salary base that they need. And so you can bring that information to the table, and it is a negotiation. So even if they say no, you can, if they say no to what you're asking for, you can come back with something else, and it's an open conversation. I mean, if you are committing to this role, those are going to be continuous conversations that you're going to be having down the road. And so I don't believe personally that your offer could be rescinded just because you asked to negotiate your offer. And it takes practice. So it's not something you're either good or bad at. You can get better at it. And I will popcorn it to Mary.
Okay, thank you, Mandy, for that. And I completely agree with everything you said. I think I'll add a little bit of cultural nuance. Oftentimes, we're socialized to believe how we're supposed to offer or accept jobs, or I think identity plays a huge role in that as well, and who's going to feel comfortable and safe to negotiate. But I think all jobs are negotiable. I agree with Mandy. I wish, coming out of undergrad and even sometimes grad, I was hesitant depending on the situation to negotiate because, one, it could be that I felt like what was offered was acceptable, or that I was just like, can I? And questioning myself, and imposter syndrome and all these different things that can play a role into these kind of nuance. But I definitely believe you should always attempt to negotiate. Sometimes companies may not be able to offer additional pay, but you may be able to negotiate other things, right? Like schedule, benefits, remote work arrangements, tuition reimbursement, childcare benefits, etc., like relocation fees, things in that nature. And one of the things that my mentor always told me, if you don't ask, it's always going to be no, right? So you won't know unless you ask. And I think these myths are very problematic and really has played a hindrance in a lot of people's ability to even try to approach a job, negotiate, and offer things in that nature. And so I agree, like it's not something that you're bad at. You're not born bad at these things. It's a skill with anything that you do. It's a learning process, and you learn about yourself, your confidence, what skills you bring to the table. Because at the end of the day, if a job is offering you the position, they feel like you were the right candidate, right? So you have skills that you're bringing. And so it's about knowing what you have and how you can negotiate those things and how you present that to, the hiring manager or supervisor or whatever the case may be. And I often look to my friends and like, can I have this conversation with you? Because sometimes that initial conversation is nerve-wracking. I don't care who you are. And so I kind of do like, mock negotiations. Sometimes we do mock interviews and things of that nature. But really having that practice is really important. And it's okay to say like you want to learn more and learn how to do those things. And sometimes we're socialized to feel like we have to know it all. And realistically, we don't need to know it all. And you just come with practice and things in that nature. And to go to the rescinding the offer, how I read that question was really, if you ask for negotiation, they'll rescind the offer. I don't think that's something that I believe in. So that's how I took the question. And so definitely always negotiate. Is negotiation a one-time thing once you take the job? I think there's conversation afterwards about kind of again, what is negotiating? Are you negotiating this entire package? Or once you get into the space, you're saying like, okay, I realize that I'm doing additional duties. And so we need to have a conversation and a revisit of my salary and things in that nature, because what was said was my job duties. When I went to my PDQ and the work that I'm actually doing in the role is completely different. And I think that's always open for conversation. Oh, passing it on, Noel, sorry.
No worries. So just to add in a little bit of a few other ideas here, I agree with what both ladies have said so far. You know, job offers are absolutely negotiable. I was fortunate to be part of an undergraduate business fraternity that taught me how to negotiate as a junior in college, and I've negotiated every single job offer as a result. And even companies that publicly say we won't negotiate, I'm proof that that they will. So I think the first step, though, is really knowing what you're worth and what sets you apart. So whether that's your personal identity and which pieces of your identity, right? Like for me, it was the fact that I had served on the board of directors for a international organization. So I brought that experience to my first job, and I brought that public speaking experience to that career where it was really high value to come in the door on the first day and know how to speak to a crowd of 25,000 people. And so I was able to go to the table and didn't love their offer, kind of pushed back. And for a company that said, nope, we don't negotiate, they met me, right? And that offer, that negotiation was done as a softball because I really wanted to be part of that company. And so it was more, I'm really looking forward to joining the team. However, I was disappointed in this. Can we talk about it? Whereas another job offer a couple years down the line was, unless we can really meet this number, I'm just not going to be able to entertain a move of this nature at this time, right? Because I wasn't as passionate about the job. And so they needed to meet a specific salary number before I was going to consider going any further. I also knew that salary number was required for my personal budget to make that jump. So knowing yourself, knowing the marketplace, and knowing the skills that you bring to that specific job are going to be your keys to making that job offer negotiable. If you don't have those pieces, you're going to find a lot more difficulty in taking that first step. Again, agree with what was said before as far as an offer being rescinded. As long as you're respectful in your negotiations, I've never seen an offer be rescinded. I know that negotiation is something that some of my friends and family members have struggled with because their personality is a little bit less outgoing, a little bit more risk averse. And so, as Mary talked about, right, we've done some of those mock conversations of like, know your worth, know what you're bringing to the table, and then ask it in a way that's genuine for you, right? For me, very comfortable in these sorts of conversations, but for my husband, not as comfortable in these conversations. So he goes about it in a different way, and doing a mock negotiation or a mock conversation helps us get there. And then finally, it's definitely not a one-time thing. Negotiation is something that you should be thinking about at every review, right? Every time that you meet with your boss, if you have a career goal or you have a next step you want to take, make sure that you're doing your due diligence to really prove that out. So when it comes to that half-year review or it comes to that end of the first year on the job, you can confidently say, hey, we weren't quite where I wanted to be on salary when I came in the door. Now that we're a year in and we've talked through my PDR and it looks good, can we talk about what that next step is? Where am I on the salary band and where do you think I should be? So certainly great set of conversational points, and agree with the ladies before me.
Awesome. Yeah, we thought that the true and false was a really great place to start this dialogue because I think that so many people take stock in these, what all of you agree, basically, that they're myths. They are 100% false, or most of the time they are very false, and they have totally diminished people's ability or thought process or confidence in themselves to go into a negotiation process. And it's what we hear from students and alumni a lot, that they don't want to go into a negotiation at all because they either feel like they're bad at it, or they don't want to have their job offer taken away, or the company said they don't negotiate, or whatever. And helping people to realize that even though it's something that may not feel comfortable or genuine, or something that they love doing, that negotiations should still be part of that process and conversation. So really good place to start. So we will go ahead and move into the next section. So you touched a little bit, everybody touched a little on this, but thinking about how you prep to go into a negotiation, how do you feel that candidates can set themselves up for success going into a negotiation? What resources would you recommend to make sure that they can negotiate correctly? So like where would you go to find, available benefits or salaries or things like that you could use to give yourself the right information? And what specific talking points should you be prepared? So for example, if you were going into one of those a practice session, what would you want to practice so that you could feel confident going into that negotiation? And I guess just to switch it up, we will start with Mary. All of you are going to go first eventually. So,
yeah. So when it comes to how candidates can set themselves up for success, I think it's important, and I think everyone has mentioned this before, know your worth, right? I think it's important to know what you bring to the table. I think you have to do the research of the company or the organization, know who they are, what they want, what they're looking for. If you can get some insider information, that would be completely great. But sometimes it's not always possible. I typically, if I'm going to, I'm in higher education, so I typically look at reviews. I look at what research has been done on this institution, what literature has come from the institution. And because I'm in equity and inclusion, really, what are they doing beyond this diversity statement, right? What are the programs and things that they are doing, and how can I add to that? Again, right? I'm coming to the table to say, I'm expanding your portfolio. I'm expanding your organization to the next level. I'm making it progressive. And so what does that look like? And so, doing the research of the company or organization or institution, knowing your worth, right? And I think that's really important as you're navigating when you get into the negotiation conversation, you're able to articulate specifically, right? You don't want broad statements. You want to be able to say specifically, this is what I'm doing. This is how I can improve, right? It should be you're working together with whoever is offering you the position. Because you don't want to come off or for me personally, you're just well, yeah, you need me because that's what it is. But realistically, you want to seem like you're genuine and wanting to work with them, and this is the company that you want to be a part of. Build your case. Think about what are the salaries that are for your position or other positions that are similar to you across the organization. And so having those different things are really important when you're entering into negotiations. You need to be specific about how you can bring value to this organization. What resources do you recommend? Some of the things that I already kind of talked about. One of the things that, especially if it's a public institution, salaries are public. A lot of information is public. I know there's various websites where you can get information about salaries, benefits, reviews of the institution. So that's really important those resources are really important. And I mean, just to repeat myself, those talking points, right? Really breaking it down. And for me, I have to write things out. So really writing out what that looks like. So when I'm going to negotiate, I literally have my written list in front of me to talk about. These are the things that, when I interview, this is the things that came up. And this is where an area that you said that you want to improve as an organization. Actually, if you add me to this company, this is how I'm going to meet that standard and actually exceed that, right? And I think that gets people, don't ask the employer to remember their experience with you, right? Be able to articulate that once you're having that conversation with them. So those are the things that I think are important when I'm going into preparing for negotiations. And are we popcorning again? I'll go to Noelle.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. So again, I agree with a lot of great points there, right? I would say one thing to add in setting yourself up for success in the negotiation, knowing your worth is absolutely important, but also knowing your budget. I have a lot of great mentees who, they have an outstanding resume and they have great internships and they're ready to take the world by storm and they want to go work in that big city and they accept that $60,000 salary. And I'm like, oh, honey, you're going to have trouble making rent at that level. And so it's very different if you're going to work in, New York City versus if you're going to work in Madison, Wisconsin versus if you're going to work in, Las Vegas. And so really knowing your budget of where you're looking to go, where that job is located, and what it's going to cost you to maintain a standard of living that you're going to be comfortable with. I don't want any of you to end up in a situation where you have to split a apartment, a 700 square foot apartment 4 ways, unless that's what you want and it's really something that you're passionate about. So just know your budget on top of knowing your worth, and make sure that they match before you put yourself in a situation where you have to make some of those hard choices. Kind of know yourself first. As far as resources, I would call out that professional organizations can be an outstanding resource to get an idea of the salary in your profession, whether you're a starting position or whether you have 5 or 10 years of experience on the job. And again, looking for that to be geographically based. So, I have some good friends who work for a software company down the road here in Madison, Wisconsin, and some of them sometimes compare kind of where they're at to a Facebook or a Google. But again, geographically, looking at California cost of living versus Madison, Wisconsin cost of living, you're talking about apples and oranges. So being able to really be aware of the market and geographically what the market demands, so that you're fairly compensated, but you're also not expecting something in your career that's not going to match the lifestyle that you're able to achieve. And then as far as talking points, I think Mary really hit the nail on the head. Matching up the job description and what the company said their strategic goals are, or the plan for this particular position is, with your personal experience, being able to make it unique. And in a negotiation, my goal is that every single thing I say about why you should give me more in this area or that area is really something that somebody else couldn't put on their resume, or very few could, right? So that's something that really is a unique skill set. It's not, I'm well versed in Microsoft PowerPoint. It's I'm well versed in Kavana and can present it at this particular level, right? Or have used it to help a small business before. So it's something very specific that I can bring to the table, which sets me apart from my peers. Otherwise, most HR departments really are offering you something kind of off their standard. So you need to call out why you're different than their standard and what sets you apart. So I will popcorn it to Mandy.
Thanks, Noelle. I completely agree with both of you in doing your research, knowing your worth, and knowing what you need. I think to set yourself up for success, you should know what's important to you, because I think, like Mary said earlier, a lot of things are negotiable, not just the salary. So if you have a family or are taking care of your parents, you can ask to spend some time working from home or ask for more PTO. A lot of things are negotiable. I know the last time I accepted a job, it was important for me to have more time in between my 2 jobs. And so I was able to push back that start date because my dad was in town and I don't see him very often. And that a part of that was also understanding, do my values align with the company, that they're able to work with me in these certain situations. And then I love all the resources that the both of you called out. I think even just Googling typical salary of X position in Y city, I think you can get a lot of firsthand information from individuals who are already in those roles. And then even talking to individuals in the company and getting a better sense of what they've been offered. And then with specific talking points, back to what you said earlier, Noelle, about not everybody necessarily being outgoing and being able to have that conversation on the spot. I would put myself in that bucket, and most of my negotiations happen over email because I do see it as kind of a business conversation. And over email, I'm able to lay out all of my qualifications, all of my non-negotiables, and we're really able to meet right in the middle and have that continued conversation with the research to back it up with each response.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you all hit on some really great points with that. I think the research and the resources piece is huge. That a lot of people feel nervous to go into a negotiation process because they're like, I don't even know what to ask for. Like, how do I know if I'm asking for too much? There's always that very popular like job application question, like, what's your salary requirement? And people are like, do I just like throw darts at a board and like hope that I pick a number? Like, they don't even know where to start. And so I think that preparation piece is key, and that it makes people feel a lot more confident going into that process because, like you said, you have done the research, you have put in the effort and everything, and you have some tangibles to show. Like if your employer comes back and says like, yeah, that's entirely ridiculous, like there's no way that we could do that. Okay, well, here's some people that are working at, our competitor that are making this much. Like, I don't understand why this is so not an option. So I think that's the piece that really sets you up for success when you're thinking about negotiation. So I'm really glad all of you hit on some big resource pieces with that, and that it seems like it's been a really big help when all of you have, started to go into a negotiation personally. That research and prep has been really key. Awesome. So thinking a little bit about what you do when it goes wrong. So even when, you do all this research and everything and you go into your negotiation process and you feel great about it and you practice and everything, thinking about what happens when it doesn't work. So how do you deal with a rejection in the negotiation process? What do you do when they say no? And maybe we can think about this one from two sides. So from the, I'm coming in as a brand new employee, and also from the, I've been here a year negotiating, based on my good performance. And then the second part is tips, but you all hit on these. So maybe just the first one, because we've already talked a lot about tips on how to research and all of that sort of stuff. So thinking about what happens when you're rejected, and we will start with Noelle on this one. Like I said, everybody's going to go first.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Lynn. So actually, I hit a couple of roadblocks in my last negotiation, and I was a little disappointed because I hadn't hit some of these roadblocks before. Right, fourth round of changing companies, similar career, but just changing companies, and I hit a couple of roadblocks that I really didn't expect. The good news is that they really wanted me on the team and I really wanted to be there. So the way that we addressed it was I'm always ready to pivot. So my initial ask was kind of rebuffed, and I said, okay, well, if we can't do that up front, let's revisit that in a year. But is there availability for a sign-on bonus? Is there availability for, moving expenses is a good example. And so typically, people want to say yes in a negotiation. I think Mary mentioned this earlier, they've chosen you. They want you to be on their team. So they want to be able to say yes. Going down to that second level, they were able to say yes, which was great. There was another piece of the puzzle they weren't able to say yes to around PTO. And so, I had the opportunity to say, okay, well, this is why it's important to me. Like, these are the things that are happening in my life at this point. And we're further along in the negotiation at this point. They know I'm joining. They know I'm accepting. I know they want me. But we had a conversation around, what does the work culture look like, so that if I need to go to a fraternity conference and I need to leave at 3:00 on a Friday afternoon, am I expected to take 2 hours of PTO, or is it okay to just block my calendar and know that I've put in those 2 hours somewhere else? And some of that is the benefit of being in a salaried position, but some of that is also based on the work culture of where you're at. And so that was a good opportunity to kind of have that conversation more about the culture, and to Mandy's point, see kind of where their attitudes around that were and whether or not they meshed with my lifestyle and the career and life balance that I want moving forward. I do want to answer the tips question very quickly because I had two things that popped in my head as Lynn was wrapping up the last slide. One is that your manager is a huge resource. So even once you've gotten into the company, we've talked about the fact that negotiation continues. Look to your manager as a resource and constantly be gleaning feedback, because that sets you up for your next negotiation. And along with that, look at the HR job role of the next spot that you want to be. Most companies have either formal or informal job roles laid out on paper. So, for instance, in a project management career, you typically start as like a junior PM, then a senior PM, then you might become like a PM lead, and then a PM manager, for instance. And so if I'm currently in a junior PM role and I want to be in a senior PM role, I might go to HR or go to my manager and say, can I get a copy of the job role for that next level up? I want to make sure I'm preparing myself with the skills to take on that next step in my career. And then I have that conversation with my manager on a monthly basis to say, hey, this is a piece that I feel like based off of my feedback, I need to work on to be ready for this next step. Here are the things that I'm doing to work on it. Does that seem to align with what you expect? Again, just putting more tools in my tool belt to go to that next negotiation and push for that shift or that promotion or that salary change. So a couple of tips there for you. And I'll popcorn it back to Mary.
Okay, thank you, Noelle. Yes, and yes. I agree with everything you're saying, and I think rejection for me personally is I'm not the person like the silver lining or positive Patty. Like I definitely am feedback is really important to me, and so I'm always looking for ways to improve. And so if you can't get necessarily that feedback from the company, I do agree with maybe reaching out to mentors or your current supervisor to say, like, this is what happened, right? This was the process. Can you give me any feedback on, maybe the next time, how would I go about doing these things? And I think it was mentioned, there sometimes it's just non-negotiables. Like I go back to, you have to know your worth. Like, and I want to acknowledge that I know everyone's situation is not the same. Like for some people, like they may feel like they don't have the ability to negotiate because there are certain situations like they need financial support. And so whatever financial support they get, they have to make decisions about their livelihood. So I want to acknowledge that and come in a space of knowing, like, for some people, due to their situation, they feel as though they can't negotiate. And maybe in a situation, if they're food insecure, housing insecure, they may need, like, I need a job, okay? But I do think when it comes to how to deal with it, I go back to, how do I improve myself? I try not to take it personally, or, I try my best to not try to critique myself so much that it impacts me the next time that I move into another role, but that I grow from this opportunity. And the tips, I could completely agree. I think sometimes when we get into positions, we're just like, this is the salary and this is the end, but we're not really looking to, expand our potential or the position or go to the next step. And so how are you, those annual performance evaluations, how are you looking to take the time? So when I came in, there was an opportunity. I also hit a roadblock for a position that I was interested in, and they said that the salary was non-negotiable, and really knew that the budget that they were provided, like it really truly was non-negotiable. Like, this is what we have at the max that we could provide for you. And so that conversation about, well, what about professional development funds? What about relocation fee? Like, those conversations were really important. And it's like, okay, well, if I can't meet the salary, I need the culture in the office to be one that's very, very, very supportive, right? Because there are some things that I'm gonna have to deal in my personal life because it's not meeting the needs that I have, that I'm going to need that support from my supervisor and my colleagues. And so that was one of the things. And it was also a part of the negotiation was, after a year, like that was a part of my negotiation. After a year, we have to revisit this conversation and talk about an increase. And I actually was able to get my position reclassified, right? Because I came in, I looked at that PDQ, and I'm like, okay, this is what you're asking me. This is what colleagues across the campus is making. Make this make sense. I didn't say like that, right? I didn't say like make it make sense, but it was really about having a conversation about, okay, this is my worth. This is what we're doing. Like, even from an HR perspective, this is what everyone's salary is in this range, and I'm not necessarily making that. And so can we have a conversation, because I have additional duties in comparison to other people who may be having the same kind of reporting line. And so I negotiated that, okay, well, I may not get what I wanted the first time, but we have to come back to this conversation because I just don't think it fits the things that I need. And so I think that is something when I'm thinking about rejection, you may not necessarily get what you want initially, but it's always a way to negotiate something. Not always salary. It's not always salary, but money is great. Let's just be clear, like you have bills to pay. And so we definitely want to be able to provide financial support in a way that we should, but there's other things that you can definitely negotiate. And Mandy, there you go.
Thanks, Mary. I really appreciate you naming the fact that sometimes we might not be in the place to negotiate. I'm thinking about right out of college, I had multiple job offers, but I really wanted to be able to support my family and just picked the highest offer, not necessarily aligned with what I wanted to do in the future because I saw the highest number. But that could have been a leveraging tool to do something that I wanted to do more and meet me at that salary number with the other offer. Really wish I knew that at the time. But I'm also thinking about your needs and your wants and maybe when faced with rejection, asking for 3 things and being okay with getting 2 of them. I think both of you have talked about there are many different layers to negotiation, and that first rejection isn't a complete no in the negotiation conversation because it is a conversation. And tips for helping people feel more comfortable negotiating. I think what I said earlier about finding your medium for how you want to have the negotiation conversation is very important. I think for me, those face-to-face conversations can feel very emotional. And while it may feel very emotional for you, it doesn't have to be a really emotional conversation because at the end of the day, it is a business decision for the company that you may or may not accept the job offer for. And so it's important to be able to be in a headspace to provide all of that information and put your best foot forward.
Awesome. Yeah, I think those are all really good points that all of you hit on, you know. And I think the important thing that I'm really happy that you all sort of touched on is that I mean, I would classify all of you as experienced and, you know, skilled negotiators, but even for the 3 of you, you all, you know, touched on some experiences where it didn't go the way you hoped. And that you know, you've learned, you've moved forward, and you've kind of incorporated that into your skill set so that like the next time you will be ready and you will have, you know, a new skill developed in order to get over whatever that roadblock is. Because yeah, it can feel really challenging, you know, when you go into one of these and they say, no, okay, well, I guess I'm bad at this. I should never do it ever again. Like, why would I bother? But I think the important thing that all of you touched on is that you learn and you incorporate it into your skills for next time. So moving a little bit into our last section, which focuses a bit more on the identity aspects, which have been hit on a little bit, but how does your identity inform how you show up when negotiating compensation and benefits? And if there are folks within or outside of your identity group that have educated or supported you in your negotiation, like learning process and experience. And since everybody has gone on first already, I'll just let whoever go, you know, it'll be like a Hunger Games, you know, survival of the fittest thing. So whoever wants to jump in, just go for it.
All right, I'll be that person. I'll be that person. So my identity, I present as female, and I present as Caucasian. I have insanely curly hair, which you can't see right now, but I present as Caucasian. So my identity really, first and foremost, shows up as female. And in an interview process, I've had to learn, or I've been coached in the past to actually temper some of my go-getter, first at the table, lean in type personality, right? And as a woman, I've certainly been in the room where you put something out on the table and there's 10 guys in the room and maybe 2 or 3 other women, and the same idea comes up from somebody else and it's attributed to them, right? We've all been there. And so for me, being female and knowing the pay equity gap between men and women, even in my career segment, which is a little more evenly split from a gender perspective, that's the biggest piece of my identity that shows up there. The other thing that shows up that isn't visual is that I've been food insecure. I've been at a situation where I'm pulling more money out of my bank account on a monthly basis than I'm putting in. And so, when we negotiate salary, that is a very emotional piece of the puzzle for me, because I never want to be back in that space. And I want to achieve the life and the economic security that I've worked hard to earn. And so those are the things that come forward. And as a woman, taking a harder stance in the negotiating table really has played well for me as an individual. Again, coming at it from that research perspective, that is something that in the back of my mind I'm very aware of, that I have to have that research to back me up, that as a woman, it may not be taken at face value, but putting that into place has been a positive for me. I've also been very fortunate to have strong female leaders and strong male leaders who have helped me understand how to pull feedback out of male colleagues and out of male managers who may be concerned about, making a woman cry. It's certainly a fear of a lot of our friends in management. But like pulling that feedback out so that I can be better, so that I can move forward in my career, because if you're not willing to give me that feedback, then I can't be prepared for that next negotiation or that next step. And you're really doing me a disservice as my manager. And so they've really helped me understand that process. My sorority sisters in Alpha Kappa Alpha and my fraternity brothers in Delta Sigma Pi have also been phenomenal assets in helping me understand negotiation and just how to present myself in the appropriate manner going through these processes as well. So really grateful for a diverse group of people behind me supporting me in that process. So Mandy, I haven't popcorned it to you, so I'll popcorn it over.
Thanks, Noelle. I am a Delta Sig as well, so excited to be with a brother. And so I'm also thinking about, I identify as an API female, and everything that you have said about being a woman and the pay gap definitely resonates with me. And I also know for a fact that people of color don't negotiate as much as non-people of color. And so sometimes I grapple with my privilege and being able to even have that negotiation conversation, but also knowing that I need to ask for more to reduce that gap that has been created. And this is a conversation that I've had with my organization, since we do work heavily with the BIPOC community. And I've been told that they don't negotiate because of the inequities with individuals identifying as BIPOC who aren't negotiating as much as white individuals at our organization, and how that widens the gap. But as a person of color, I think it's important to have those conversations and mentor others to be able to have those conversations so that we can all decrease that gap. And I owe so much of where I am now to my mentors who are both female and male and AAPI and non-AAPI, to be able to have those different perspectives. I know the very first time I did negotiate for a specific role, it was because I talked to my coworker who identifies as a male, and it was so easy for him. I was so shocked. He put himself in my shoes and basically had that conversation based on what he knew about me. And it just blew my mind and completely shifted what I thought I was capable of. And so I think it's just so important for us to advocate for ourselves. And I will pass it to Mary.
Thank you. I am also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So when you said it, I was like, oh, hey, how you doing? But yeah, I completely agree. I think even this particular topic could be its own session, right? The role of identity, and I think as I was speaking from the lens of being a Black woman. This is how I present. And I think acknowledging also that bias exists in institutions, right? So when I arrive, how I speak, how I look, even if I wear my hair natural, even going on interviews and things like that plays a role in these standards of professionalism or standards of how we're supposed to enter into spaces has an impact on us. And so identity plays a role before the negotiation. I mean, it plays a role in everything, right? And I actually was looking at a Harvard study that said 60% of women don't even negotiate. And they typically leave positions rather than negotiate, they'll leave because they're underpaid, right? And those and these studies are really out there to show this is something that's really important. And as you add more intersecting identities, it becomes less and less, right? And so I know one of the things that I struggle with being a Black woman, there's this superwoman trope, right? This Black women could do everything. And so when we're talking about, well, let me put all these things on your plate, because it's also when I'm at work, well, you can do these things, right? And there's additional work that's being put onto the plate. And so when we're talking about renegotiating and having those conversations, it's okay, well, across the board, as I look to my counterparts, these are their responsibilities, these are their PDQs, and yet mine is like this. We need to have a conversation about salary, or we need to have a conversation about reducing my responsibilities. And so identity plays a role in obviously being in an office that looks at equity and inclusion. We talk about identity all the time. People try to remove it, and it's something you really can't, right? I enter in space, how I perceive that I'm being perceived or how I'm being perceived. I mean, all that matters, right? And so when we're talking about what benefits you have, and when I talk about initially about how we're socialized, sometimes we're socialized as White people, keep your head down, keep it moving, just do what you need to do. And I also had great mentors. I think I was able to get out of that because I had Black women who were you got to ask what you want, right? They're not going to give it to you. You got to take it. You got to demand it. And so I grew up with that mentality of, I was taught, you sit in the front of the class, you do these things because people are trying to make you invisible. They're trying to silence your voice, and you can't allow them to do those things. And so when I negotiate, I try to when I say be specific, I give numbers, right? I can say, and Noelle talked about this, it's not that I just know, Excel, I know this program, I've been able to do these things and I've made this impact. Because if I'm allowing for people to create their own story of me, I personally don't think it's going to be good. So I'm not going to let you create the narrative. I'm going to create my narrative. And so it's really important. In my support system, my mentors, I talk to them about everything, when it's good, when it's bad, and they challenge me, because when I say imposter syndrome is real, I've even had supervisees say, Dr. Whitehead, you can do these things. You're doing this. And I'm like, yeah, I am. I am doing these things. And so really having that community of people who may share identity with you, or your multiple identities or whatever, who can really help guide you, and you got to pay it for it. I'm always big about mentoring as well. And so making sure that, people don't have to go through my first time, I was just I just need a job and I'm going to take what I got to take. But I wish I could have and did, negotiate those things. And I want to make sure that I bring Black women to be able to negotiate those things right out of college or at any time. So.
Yeah, I totally agree that we could have probably done an entire hour plus conference day, workshop, seminar, I don't even know, conference about the impact of, different identities and their intersection with, negotiation and all of that. And I mean, we're hoping to unpack a little bit more next week when we talk more about navigating power dynamics in the workplace. And so I imagine some similar themes will probably come up in that dialogue. But I think all of you hit on such amazing points because all of you, have the similar aspect of identifying as female, but have very different experiences because of, your other identities. And I think, exploring and understanding a little bit about how those come into play when going into these dialogues and in the workplace and all of that sort of stuff is really key because I think that self-awareness and all of that sort of it underlines how you go into those conversations and also sort of thinking about how potentially a conversation is going to turn out or what roadblocks or all of that sort of stuff come into it. There's so many things swirling around this topic. So I think all of you hit on really, really good points. But that is actually all of the questions that we had pre-rehearsed. So you can all take a nice little breathe of relief there. The pop quiz section is over. But it is also right at our time. I do want to thank all of you for helping us out with today's dialogue. If anybody has, some final thoughts on this or, a key thing that you wanted to share before we wrap up today, I definitely invite you to do that. So if anybody wants to start, no pressure if you don't have anything else to share, but I can close this up after we're finished. Final thoughts, anyone?
Just one.
Okay,
We've said it
perfect.
a number of times, but don't forget that when you're in a negotiation, it's because somebody wants you in the first place. You're in a negotiation because somebody made you an offer, or you're in a negotiation because you've been part of that company, right? So just remember that. We talk about knowing your worth, but you got to know what you're worth to somebody else too. So the fact that they've invited you to the table means that it's never really a rejection. It's just a conversation. And thank you for having us today. This has been phenomenal. And thank you to my fellow panelists. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. I love that closing piece you just shared. I think that's like the best, I don't know, nice little bow on the package here. I love that. Great place. I couldn't have queued that up better if I had done it myself. So I will go ahead and wrap us up. So as a reminder, this session is co-hosted between Career Services and Student Diversity and Social Justice. Here is both of our websites and Facebook, Insta, YouTube, all the things, information. This recording will be posted. So thanks again to our panelists for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing folks at our presentation next week. Same time, same place. We'll see everybody there.